All right, guys, what's going on? It's your man Unspoken Reviews, and I wanted to bring you guys a mild spoiler review of Scream 7. All right, guys. So I want to talk a little bit about the Scream franchise because it's one of those iconic franchises that has been going on for years, right? I think nobody can deny that the franchise has become one of the best in terms of horror, and it has been doing it ever since the first Scream film. I've always loved that these films are kind of meta to themselves. They talk about the idea of how you survive scary movies, that all the rules and tropes that go into scary movies dictate how characters survive and die. And when you get to like the trilogies, how it all changes up and the body count gets bigger, and there's always some kind of strange revelation that characters did not know before that kind of affects the overall story, and it's always done that. It's always evolved. We've gotten requels. And I've always liked how, like I said, I've always liked how it's always been so meta, right? It knows what it is and it's not afraid to go there. And I like how there's different types of characters, some who may survive, some who may not. You get the different kind of characters that look a little shady. You think they may be the killer. Some characters may be missing for a long period of time. You find out they're the killer. A person that you thought was the killer turns out to not be the killer. They just look shady, but you find out that they just care so much and they were acting a certain way. And it's always been a trope with all these films, but it's always worked. I've loved a lot of the Scream films, especially, yeah, three. Even though a lot of people would crap on three and it had its moments, I didn't hate three. I mean, I've always thought it was weird that a person would run back into the house to read three words on a piece of paper rather than run back outside with that piece of paper. That would have been my idea, but it is what it is. These films have always known what they are, and they're not afraid to go there and make those mistakes while at the same time poking fun at themselves. It has sometimes worked, and sometimes it has not. And Scream 7, I'm sorry to tell you guys, did not work, at least in my opinion. All right, guys, so I want to let you guys know I was never upset about Scream 5 or 6. A lot of people were upset that these films did not it only featured the legacy characters of like Sidney, Gale, and Dewey. I didn't mind that because as we got new characters like Chad, Mindy, Sam, and Tara, I kind of looked at those films as if these movies were the passing on of the mantle, right? We started to see characters die off a lot more in the earlier films. Like by two and three, we lost like Randy and Cotton, characters that have been there from the beginning. And it kind of made sense that as you're going forward, these characters die. They have different ways of coming back. Like Randy had that videotape in three. So they kind of feature the characters a little bit, but it doesn't rely on them. It lets them die off and it brings in new characters to kind of shine. And I've liked that about five and six. That's my personal opinion. You know what I mean? I really liked, despite how many people were very sad about it and it was very dramatic, I was glad that Dewey kind of died in the fifth one. And it kind of felt like something that needed to happen, right? He was a character that had been there and been through all these films, has survived all these attacks. And then finally, by this film, he's actually taken out. And it was done in a nice, gory, cruel way that kind of hit fans' heartstrings a little bit, but kind of went in line with how the character would respond in situations, having like his kind of distracted moment by him looking at the cell phone while Gail is calling. He has this kind of dumbfounded smile on his face to show that he still loves her, even though they weren't married anymore. And I kind of thought the films will follow that kind of direction, right? Like five, Dewey died. By six, I believe Gail should have died. And by seven, I think that Sydney should have died, right? I thought it would have been pretty cool if by five and six we introduced this new guard where you have Tara, Sam, Chad, and Mindy coming along, and by the seventh film, you would have Sydney's death alongside with her daughter Tatum kind of taking on the reins of, the starring Scream Queen, right? It would be like this would be the new group of characters. You would have these five new characters that would carry on the legacy of the series and the franchise. And I thought that would have been pretty cool, in my opinion, right? I wouldn't have mind that if Seven had did that. However, we do know there was some kind of political issues going on with the character or the actress that plays Sam in the film, and they decided to boot her out and make Neve Campbell the starring role. There's nothing wrong with that because Neve Campbell has been awesome in all these films and everyone that she's been in. And you know what? her not being in seven didn't necessarily bother me too much. I kind of felt like, okay, this is taking on new territory. There's new characters. There's new drama that's taking place. There's new characters that are being affected by the Ghostface. The motives for the villains were much, much different, which I liked. It really worked for the villains that came up this time as Ghostface, right? They just had a score to settle with Sam. And I was like, okay, this worked for me. I really liked it. I believed it. And one of the things I gotta say about Scream films is that the motive of the Ghostface has to really work. If it doesn't work, it's hard to really get invested in why all these things have happened. In the first film, when Billy and Stu go off and start becoming Ghostface killers, Billy's reason for wanting to do it made strong sense, right? Finding out his dad was cheating on his mom with Sydney's mother and all the things that she was doing and how his family got broken up, I would understand why someone would snap at that moment, right? I understood why his mom came back and tried to off Sydney. I was like, okay, even though Mickey's reasoning in two seemed kind of weird and dumb because nobody was going to get past blaming the movies for what he did. That was never going to work. But Mrs. Loomis coming back, I was like, okay, I understand why she wants revenge, right? It was just pure 100% revenge for what happened to Billy. By the third film, it was a little weird having her brother come in, but his motives were somewhat sound, right? It was a little bit weird. By the fourth film with Sydney's cousin Jill, it kind of worked, kind of didn't. Having a Ghostface, I kind of just wanted to do it because she wanted to be the better family member or stand out the same way Sydney did, kind of looking at her trauma as like a fame that she wanted to succeed at. It kind of worked, kind of didn't, right? Especially for the new generation like Gen Z, it kind of worked for that. Then when we got to 5, I like how it switched up and brought back legacy Ghostface characters like, Billy Loomis and his connection with his daughter. And her connection with Sydney and all these other characters really made it work, right? So when we got to like the boyfriend being the killer alongside with the other girl, I can't remember her name, God help me, them being the killers, it kind of worked, right? They were kind of obsessed with her and then they kind of wanted to continue the requel the way that the Meek twins kind of explained it, right? It kind of worked for me. Then by 6, it still worked because, like I said, they wanted revenge on Sam for what they did to, the original killer from 5. By 7, there was really no connection between what we saw and what we were told. It just didn't really connect. Like, there was nothing that made me feel like it mattered. All right, so before we go further on, guys, I want to let you guys know these are mild spoilers. I am going to be giving away some spoilers to the film. But if you guys don't want it ruined and you want to just go watch the film, please go watch it. Then you can come back and listen to the review. So this way you can kind of have more an understanding of where I'm coming from with this movie. Okay, I'll give it its positives, okay? The kills were pretty good. Most of them were pretty good. Like the opening kill with the one character when they go to the replica of the Stumacher house, it worked, right? Like when he gets stabbed in the head and you can literally see his eye, shifting and being destroyed as the knife is going in his head. Brutal kill. I loved it. But here's the part that threw me off. When the one girl gets the call from the Ghostface killer and she goes into the room, there is a crucial clue that she misses that I didn't understand how you missed, right? Her boyfriend goes off to the bathroom, and mind you, in this room, there's this automated Ghostface, okay? So every time you get close to it or move, it moves, and it makes, like, stabbing motions, and it talks to you like it's going to kill you, right? Okay, cool. But when she walks into the room to call out to her boyfriend, she walks into the room, and she doesn't see anything different in the room. Starts messing with the automated Ghostface. Her boyfriend scares her, and then it turns out it's a real Ghostface, and it ends up trying to kill them. And in this moment, to defend herself, she picks up a piece of the automated Ghostface off the floor and uses it as a defensive weapon. And I was kind of like, wait a minute, how did you not see that on the floor? Like, it was not on the floor before next to the couch, but when she came in the room, the pieces were on the floor. First off, okay, listen, I'll come back to this, but I'll say it now. We all know the ghost faces have to come with this certain level of supernatural type of energy to get hit, fall down, get back up, to have like this unlimited amount of stamina, right? I've always understood that about Ghostface. But how did somebody get into the room, break down all the pieces, put them on the floor? Nobody, because they were in the kitchen the whole time. They were in the kitchen answering those calls the whole time. So they didn't hear nobody pick up this big like plastic automatronic piece of Ghostface and put it all on the floor because it was broken up in pieces and then stand there. How did they not notice that was happening? They were in the kitchen the whole damn time, right? The whole damn time. So when she comes out and uses it, first off, how did she not even notice that the pieces were on the floor? I would have noticed that the second I walked in the room because the pieces stand out. They were like gray pieces. I was just kind of like, I don't know who wrote this, but oh God. Okay. So that was one of the weirdest things I couldn't understand about the film. Okay. Okay. So another thing that threw me off, right? So one of the things about this film is that it leans heavy into nostalgia, right? It does it a lot in this movie. And I was not okay with that. It kind of like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like sometimes the music was pure nostalgic, but then it had the whole thing with the boyfriend coming in through the window. This time, of course, Sid has done this before, so she knew, kicks him out. She doesn't trust him. Totally understandable. Okay. But I didn't understand why they had to lean so heavy into nostalgia. The actual first kill of the group we have is one of Tatum's friend. Okay, Sid's oldest daughter's name is Tatum. I guess she named her after a friend. We're going to get into that because the reasoning behind that seemed weird to me. This is just the last part I'll explain. But the first kill of the movie is Tatum's friend. Okay, and before this happens, we do get an AI video call from Stu, right? A lot of fans were kind of speculating that Stu might be alive from the TV falling on his face. A lot of fans were already speculating this before the film came out, right? It's almost like the writers of the film found out what people were saying and then just decided to say the character was alive. Someone let me know if this was already something people were talking about. But we get an AI version of Stu because this is not really Stu. He is actually dead. It's just you can see like the slices all in his face. How someone used AI to actually get that right to be able to know exactly what his face would look like after a TV falls on it is beyond me. All right. But she gets a call, and Nev gets a call, or Sid gets a call from Stu and, threatening to come after. And it was a big gasp in the theater. You heard everybody was like, oh my gosh, really? It's really Stu? Newsflash, it isn't Stu. It's just the AI version. But of course, the killer is at the high school hunting down Sid's daughter. But he's not looking for Sid's daughter. He finds her friend. This is the first kill of the film, and he kills the sound guy first, who's controlling he kills the special effects guy first, and you can actually hear it in the film, which actually kind of went a long way with with the feeling of the movie, like someone just being off screen, and you suddenly hear this, and the grunt, and then someone's body falling. But of course, there's this girl who gets her guts ripped open by Ghostface while she's suspended up in the air. And of course, the movie's going through those tropes, right? Everybody's a suspect. You know how Randy, everybody's a suspect. So everyone's getting questioned. Oh, I was here at this place. I was here at that place. I was here. I was there. And there's a moment where the cop asks the boyfriend where he was at. And he says where he's at. And then that's just the end. The girlfriend doesn't, Tatum doesn't question him. But then when Tatum's other friend gets questioned by the cops, saying that she was down in the costume area, and Tatum goes, "You were down there the whole time?" And she's like, "Yeah, the whole time." And I'm like, "Yo, where's that energy for your boyfriend? Nobody knew where he was either. He could have been anywhere either." Like, I was kind of like, I understand you're dating him, but how are you going to have that energy for your friend, but not have that same energy for your boyfriend? And then when Sid is like, "Okay, we're leaving," then, there's a moment where instead of being so torn up that her best friend died, she's just like, "Why are you so mean to my boyfriend?" I was just kind of like, dude, I was just like, I understand teens being kind of dumb, but I was so lost in this film. And the film does kind of work with kids not really having an understanding of how serious ish can get, right? Like her daughter Tatum being so upset that Sid won't share the dark stuff with her because Sid's on her way out with Gail to figure out who's responsible for these killings, and she just wants to be trusted with everything, which she's not giving. All right, so before we hit that part, there's a part of the film where, the whole family goes back home, and her husband is the chief of police, right? So that's kind of beneficial to have. That kind of makes me wonder how many background checks that dude had to go through before Sid even started talking to him. And so there's like three or four cops that walk into house that do a quote unquote clean sweep of the house to make sure nobody's in the house. Bro, these guys had to have gone in rooms, opened doors, and closed them, or just turned around in three circles, checked two windows, and then left because they didn't check everything in a house. Let me tell you something, man. If there is a killer on the loose, the whole house, the whole entire house has to get scoped. I don't care what you tell me, okay? I need people up in the darkest parts of the house in the basement and the darkest spots up in the attic. The reason I say that is because the Ghostface was hiding in the attic. And as soon as everybody split up in three different spaces, I don't know how the Ghostface knew everybody was out from the second floor because the Ghostface just happens to come down at that point in time. How did they know everybody just disappeared into three different rooms? I have no freaking clue, right? It just happened. However, the Ghostface does come down, and credit to this film, the characters do put up a decent fight, right? They don't just kind of like get cut by Ghostface and not fight. Okay, having a cop and having someone who's experienced with Ghostface killers, they put up a decent fight, right? They don't just get cut and shot and all this other stuff and take ass whoopings and nothing happens. They actually put up a strong and decent fight for what they have. You know what I mean? Sid's getting it in, her husband's getting it in. I was like, okay, cool. I would believe this if I seen it, right? So, of course, there's a moment where, they're in a safe room that's just a panic room, which locks down. And it's a safe room. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to do anything. All they have to do is stay in the safe room. That's all. The Ghostface killer can't get into this room. And Sid tells her daughter, stay here. I'm going to try to circle around. And she's like, no, I want to come with you. No. This is literally a wall and a door that's built like a bank safe. That's exactly what it looks like. There is no way no matter how hard Ghostface is pounding on that door, wasn't getting in there. It wasn't happening. Okay. It just wasn't happening. Come on, man. Let's just be real. But they still go through the house anyway. And it's supposed to be kind of really tense scene. And sometimes it is, but it doesn't really work as much as it should. Okay. Because during the moments that Ghostface is trying to get at them through the wall, he ends up going downstairs, and of course, the husband is not there anymore, right? He got knocked down the stairs. Ghostface doesn't even acknowledge it. Like, you just knocked this person down the stairs, and the body isn't there anymore because he fell unconscious. So I was like, are you not going to acknowledge that body ain't there no more? And he just goes out to the front door anyway, and of course gets tackled by the cop. They put up a decent fight, and, Ghostface ends up getting hit by someone in a car who is, of course, Gail. She got a round of applause in this film. Truth be told, I love Courtney Cox in these movies, but I'm just past seeing her at this point, okay? And of course, she has the Meek twins with her. Now, the Meek twins in this film, there was really no reason for them to be there, in my opinion. I see no reason for them to be there. They had no reason outside of slight comic relief because they weren't really that funny, right? But this is the part where I felt like these three films, 5, 6, and 7, should have been changing of the guard because they came in working alongside Gail. Mindy wanted to supersede Gail and be either just like her or better. So I kind of felt like these characters could have went in that direction, but the franchise didn't do it. It felt like this was an idea that they might have done, but with Barrera having the issues that she has, the actual actress, they decided to cut Sam and Tara out. And I was just kind of like, this could have been the start of the new legacy for this franchise, and it got wasted. So of course they're just around, Chad is holding the camera. Mindy is, I guess shadowing Gail to see what she does and tries to do the whole news anchor thing here and there. But I just didn't see a need for any three of them to be there, in my opinion. Of course we find out the Ghostface is just some guy we don't know, which at first seems weird. And I like how the film still kind of plays on that it could be anybody. Like, the police line is there with all the, spectators watching. And of course, you see people that were around in the beginning of the film, like the drama teacher, Tatum's boyfriend. They all seem suspicious. And of course, that makes sense with Sid because she's going to be suspicious of everyone, right? It made sense to me. So I like the film played on that. Then we get around to, like I said, the suspension of disbelief for these films, right? I've always said before that Ghostface almost has to be like a supernatural presence. I've always accepted that. You know, that's always been okay. You got to want to feel like this individual just cannot go down easy. Personally, I think that's damn near impossible. You know what I mean? When I've watched all the films, I've watched Ghostfaces get knocked down steps, get into car crashes, you know, get have multiple things thrown at them, get hit with chairs, get hit with bats, get hit with, you know, everything imaginable. And this character just keeps getting up. And it's like, come on, man, there's got to be a limit somewhere where someone cannot put up that much fight. Okay. When we get to the tavern scene, there's a moment where a ghost face picks one of the teens up and puts their head on a spike thing that's kind of like connected to a faucet for beer at the tavern. That wasn't bad. That was a pretty unique kill. What I did not understand was how a human being, I don't care how strong you are, bro, you cannot, after a fight like that, because the Ghostface got into a fight with three different people. It got into a fight with the one friend, the Meat twins, as well as the other boy that they eventually kill with the head spike thing. And somehow, after putting up that much fight and having all that energy taken out of you, because both of the killers, we'll get to them, neither of them look like they had the strength to do this, pick this teen up by his head, lift him up, and sit on his head, like lift him up by his head. I'm not talking about like slung him over the shoulder, anything of that nature. I'm talking about held this individual by his head, picked him up, and sat his head on that spike. Damn near impossible. There's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. I laughed actually when I saw that scene. I laughed because the beer was coming out his mouth, which was kind of funny, but I laughed because it looked so damn impossible. It looked so impossible. I was kind of like, come on, man, there's no freaking way. Okay, so now before we get to the tavern scene, which is weird, one of the things that also kind of threw me at this moment was the interview scene. Okay, now the interview scene was pretty decent. Like, of course, we know Gail has never been one to hold back, and she even tells, you know, Sid even asks her, "Are you going to take it easy during this interview?" Because they're doing this to kind of draw out Stu, or who they think is playing Stu, who's the Ghostface killer, to just kind of draw them out into calling so they could trace that call. So they do this interview, pretty cool. But of course, Gail, doing what Gail does, gets very personal. She starts picking at information that, you know, that Sid doesn't want to talk about, like her kids, which is completely understandable. But in this moment, you would think that Sid, in my opinion, would kind of fire back at Gail in that moment. Like, I kind of felt like, yeah, we all know this is how Gail is. She's never been an apologetic character like that. But I felt like Sid would have kind of gave it back to her a little bit. Like when Gail brings up her kids and wondering if she's going to pass on that trauma to her children, Sid should have been like, well, how have you been doing since Dewey died? It would have been a cold blow, but it seemed like by this point, this is something that Sid would probably be old enough to be like, I'm not taking this ish from you, Gail. If you're going to do this, you're going to be answering these questions too. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would have been a great moment for both of these characters to talk about their shared trauma and how it has affected them. And this way, Tatum would have been able to see on the screen just how much Sid did not want her daughter falling down this pathway, right? She didn't want her connected to this. And I definitely understand that as a parent. You don't want your kids taking on your own fears, but you also want to be able to train them for how dark the world can get so they can be ready for it. Totally understood, but that would have been a much better scene. Okay. So after Stu calls, this is a scene that took me out of the movie, man, because this is around the mark that I was kind of like, I can't really do this movie anymore. Like the head on the spike thing was already weird. So after Stu says, "Hey, I'm at this tavern now. Your daughter is here. She's not at home anymore." We're gonna get back to something else before this scene happens. But your daughter's not here. Is actually at the tavern. She's not at home anymore, and I'm gonna go kill her. So Sid, of course, in a panic as any parent would be, runs out of the news station and goes outside to the car to try to open it. It's not her car. It's Gail's car, so she can't get in it. The natural reaction for a human being would be to either go back inside and get Gail and say, hey, Gail, we got to go to this tavern because my daughter's there and the killer is going to kill her. Or you have option two, break into the car, hotwire it, drive. Or you could have stole Gail's keys, ran out to the car, turned it on, because Gail was still in the news station. She didn't really go anywhere. She was right there. You know what I mean? Like, Gail didn't go anywhere. She turned around to talk to the news guy for 5 seconds, and Gail and Sid was gone. And I was kind of like, bro, why didn't you just run after her? You're right there. Just go outside with her. You know she's only going outside. And instead of doing any of those things, Sid just decides to start booking it in the opposite direction. Now, if you pay attention to the scene, there's like this hill that she's running up, right? And you would think that at the top of the hill, at the bottom of the hill, there's the town. No, she actually has been running for a minute. Okay. She was running like 10, 15 minutes until she realizes that she's not going to get there. And I'm just kind of like, no human being would do that. If you had to get somewhere fast, you would do that. She tries to call her husband, who doesn't pick up the phone, but she doesn't even call the other cops. Like, she doesn't call 911 to say, hey, my daughter is at this place. Can you head over there and can you send some cops to my home because my husband would not have let her leave? Have you guys heard? She didn't do any of those things. She just started running in the... Oh, Lord. So before this, oh, God. So before this, at the house, of course, by this time, Tatum has left with the Meek twins. And I was kind of lost as to, I was lost between why, like I said before, I didn't understand why the Meek twins were there. But there's a moment where even Tatum asks them, why are you guys here? And they kind of both talk about their reasons for trying to help and doing what they're doing. I was kind of wondering why nobody mentions New York, why nobody mentions, Sam or Tara, or the fact that they've been through this already. Like, there should have been a moment where Chad was like, honestly, man, I don't want to be here. He said he should have been like, last time I got stabbed like 10 or 12 times and still survived. Like, there should have been a moment like that, right? Like, and Mindy should have been like, yeah, I got stabbed too, but we know how bad this can get and we just want to do something about it. But it seems that Tatum is the one that says that instead of these two. Like, it kind of felt like they should have said that, and that could have encouraged Tatum to be like, hey, we should do something about it too. I want to help. And that would have added more validity to it. Like, it could have been them talking about what they've been through and why they wanted to help. And then Tatum wanting to be more involved would have been more encouraged to help. That's just my opinion. But that didn't happen. They just kind of talked about them wanting to supersede everything and be better than Gail. And they didn't really have much motivation, in my opinion. Like I said, I didn't see why they were there, in my opinion. They were just there as the slight comic relief because they weren't really funny, like, in my opinion. So the husband, Mark, is still there. The chief of police is there in a house surrounded by cops. There are 2 cop cars parked outside and at least 4 officers out there. I think I counted 3 or 4. This man hears a sound from his garage. And now their garage is having maintenance done on it. You would think if you heard a sound, and there's a killer out there, I don't give a damn how much you know your house. I don't give a damn how trained you are as a police officer. I don't give a damn if you're the chief of police. What you do is go outside and say, I need 4 officers. Come in here with me right now. I heard a sound in the garage. Or pick up your fucking radio and say, hey, someone check this garage. I'm going out there as well. He does not do that. He goes the fuck in there by himself, of course gets attacked by Ghostface. I was just like, dude, why would you go in there by yourself? This is the kill. I don't care how trained you are. You know how bad this can get. You would never tell any of your officers to take that risk alone like that, would you? Am I wrong in that? Of course, he does survive his stabbing. We'll get to him later because that dude was... Oh, that scene was so weird. Oh, God. Okay. So by the time we get to the end of the film, because the whole scene about Sid kind of guiding her daughter to shoot through the wall and kill Ghostface, it kind of worked for the way technology is these days. It kind of worked. So I'll accept that, okay? Of course, the boyfriend gets himself killed after she thinks that he's responsible for what he's doing. I mean, I don't know why he didn't explain to his girlfriend that he was practicing the AI deepfakes to see if he could do the same thing that this person was doing. I don't understand why he didn't explain that. I would have explained that, but he never does that. Of course, she thinks he's the killer, so she beats the shit out of him with the laptop. He ends up getting killed anyway. I don't even know why he chased after. After someone beats me with a laptop, we broken up after that. Like, ain't nothing to talk about, in my opinion. I don't care if Ghostface gets you or not. You on your own at that point. But because he wasn't even on the list to be killed, they were just after Tatum. So this is another scene that threw me. Okay, so finally, after all these scenes, we get the Ghostface reveal. And I told you guys the motivation for the Ghostface reveal has to be it. It has to work, right? So we get this scene where, Sid's going through all the houses and she's getting all these different AI versions of characters. We're seeing like the actual actresses that were in the films. We got Stu. We even had like old Mrs. Loomis. We had, Dewey, David Arquette being older. And we even had the older version of her brother all alive, which I thought was weird. They should have went with younger versions of those characters. So I guess this was a way of trying to make it seem like they were still alive, but Sidley knew they got shot in the head. So I don't understand why they went with that, because come on, every single one of these characters got shot in the head, except for Dewey. He got sliced up in the gut, but he's dead. But I guess they're just trying to come at Sid to kind of shake up her resolve a little bit. I don't know. But eventually she comes outside, finds her surrounded by Ghostface. The first Ghostface happens to be the orderly who was working at the psychiatric hospital. I was just like, okay, what is your reason for doing this? We don't really get one. We don't really get one. He doesn't come up with a legit reason for why he's doing this. He doesn't talk about something that Sid did to him in his past. He doesn't talk about, something that somebody told him or what info. He doesn't do none of that. He just talks about, I had a career in AI and technology before I became a orderly at a hospital. Okay, dude. So what is your problem with Sidney Prescott? Doesn't have one. Doesn't have one. If he had a beef with the police chief, I would have understood that. If he had a beef with Tatum, I understood that. If he had a problem with Gale, I would have understood that. I would have been like, okay, cool. All right, good. He has a stake in this with somebody. It's nobody. It's nobody. His only connection to wanting to do what he's doing is that he's helping the next door neighbor who's the killer. I don't remember her name, but it's the actress from Pitch Perfect. But honestly, bro, she looked pretty good, by the way. The way they aged her up, she looked pretty good. And it turns out that her whole motivation for wanting to kill Sidney was that Sidney inspired her after she had been in an abusive relationship. And Sid just disappeared after that. That's all she said. She said Sidney's stories in her book about how everything that she had endured or her trauma empowered her to get through her abusive relationship, and she killed her husband. Technically, I wasn't mad about that. I was like, okay, someone's abusing you, putting your hands on you, hurting your kid. I'd be like, okay, cool. Hey, when it comes to protecting you and your children, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. It is what it is. I would have understood that. Would have had no problem with it whatsoever. In my opinion, I would have been cool with it. Would have never blamed her, in my opinion. Never would have blamed her. But she wants to kill Sidney just because Sid disappeared. She kind of lost her will of understanding life because Sid was no longer in the spotlight talking about her trauma. So now she wanted to kill her. That's it. That was their motivation for becoming Ghostface killers. And I just did not comprehend how that was. After that reveal happened, anything that had me interested in the movie was gone. I was somewhat on board and was enjoying everything that was happening, even though things seemed kind of like, suspension of disbelief. I was like, okay, this is what these films have always done. By the time we got to the motivation of the Ghostface killers, I was done. I was out of it. I was like, come on, man. I was like, no, that has to work somewhere. These people have to, if they had like this thing where they had like this cult of Stu or this cult of Ghostface, I'd have been like, cool. That means there's this group out there that's worshiping Ghostface, and they feel like they have to kill Sidney Prescott because for whatever reason that the writers would have came up with, but the writers could have came up with a much better story than that, bro. I was like, come on, man. She's just here because Sidney is not there for her to worship anymore. I was lost. Okay, so we get the final fight. Of course, the guy dies real quick. Sid does not even hesitate. You know, the husband cuts Tatum out of the chair, and of course, they fight back real quick. Sid immediately goes for the headshot, which I was like, damn, girl, that's what I'm talking about. She didn't even hesitate. And, you know, they get into it, they fight. But there's a scene here where, you know, Sid is stabbing her multiple times with this screwdriver. Like, she's getting her good, man, right? She's stabbing the shit out of her. And the daughter Tatum comes out of nowhere before she can kill Sid, and she shoots her, and the woman passes out on the ground, what looks like dead. When we cut back to the scene, she's gone. And if you notice, there is no blood. There's no blood on the ground. There's no blood on the garage wall. There's nothing. There's like no blood. There's nothing. I'm like, okay, there has to be a trail of blood somewhere. Like she just disappears. And I was like, wait a minute, that's damn near impossible. Those wounds were too deep and too many and too much blood loss for her to even get away at that moment. If she had gotten away, even if she disappeared for that moment, there would be a trail of blood going somewhere. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm just thinking too much, but it wasn't there. And I was kind of like, even then, she was only down on the count for maybe about 3 seconds, and then she was gone. That's impossible. That's damn near impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. Like I said, I know these films like to do suspension of disbelief with Ghostface. Fine, whatever. So, of course, they get her, they shoot her dead, which was a pretty interesting scene to see. It was a pretty nice shot. And, you know, this is the part where I'm going to make fun of Tatum a little bit. So Sid finally opens up about why she named her after Tatum. She's like, oh, she was opinionated and vocal, and she was so strong. And I was like, wait a minute, are you talking about the Tatum that tried to sneak through the garage, the doggy door in the garage? Like, she was a smart enough person to, like, because if you watch the first Scream movie, there's a moment where she gets past Ghostface and she can hit the button on the garage. She doesn't do that. She doesn't. Now, the garage works because Ghostface turns it on, but she's right there. Her hand touches the button, but she just tries to crawl through the garage, the doggy door in the garage. And I'm like, you named her after that person? I'm like, whatever, dog, whatever. All in all, man, this movie, it sucked. It sucked. I out of all of them, I gotta say this is the worst one. And most people would reserve that for 3. I would be honest, I'd say 3 is probably the least bit. But after seeing this movie literally is the worst one. And I'm sorry, yo, but as much as I love Nev Campbell, as much as I love Sidney Prescott character, as much as I love Gale, these characters had to die off. They had to. The franchise, in order for it to evolve and turn into something else, it can't just hold on to these characters forever. It just can't. It just can't. I don't care what any of y'all say. It's the truth. When you want a franchise to change and evolve over time, you have to make room for other people to supersede that. Yeah, you had the Meat Twins, but come on, was the story really about them? They were just kind of feature characters in 5 and 6, right? Let's be honest, man. Let's just be honest. They had a connection to Randy, understandable. But what was the point of having them in there? What was the point of getting rid of Sam and Tara? I understand the whole political BS that was going on with the actress, but come on, these characters were great. Of course, some people say their story may have came to an end, but that didn't mean it couldn't evolve into something else. We still have other characters out there. Like, I can't remember the name of the other character, but she's out there. I can't think of her name. She's the actress that played in 5. She played in 4. I just can't remember her name, but she was one of the characters in Heroes, the TV show Heroes, but I can't think of her name. But we don't find out what happens to her, and she didn't die in 6. So her character could have came back and meant something to the overall story, but they just did away with it. It felt like the writers had an idea what they were going to do with Sam and Tara in 7, but because everything happened, they just scrapped them and just tried to bring Nev Campbell in and just try to alter the story. But it did not work here. You could kind of feel where the disconnect was with the characters after all these changes happened. All right, guys, but that was my review of Scream 7. It didn't work for me. It did not work for me. I'm sorry. It didn't work for me. It was a crappy movie, man. You could have did so much better than that. I think they're talking about doing an 8th film that's supposed to be going into production in the fall. Man, listen, to the writers and the people involved with this franchise, take some swings, man. Stop being afraid to kill off these legacy characters and give fresh blood and new blood a chance to thrive, man. In my opinion, this should have been Tatum, the Meek Twins, and Sam and Tara's chance to shine, and they have their own Ghostface that they have to deal with. That's what it should have been, in my opinion. Honestly, it wouldn't have bothered me if Sidney Prescott was one of the killers. She went crazy from all this. Like, a lot of people were like, wait, what? But something different, something weird, something completely off track that people would not saw coming, but would make sense, in my opinion. You go through all that ish, you're going to go crazy, in my opinion. You know, I would have dealt with Sid's dad being the killer or something of that nature. But man, I really hope they pick it up at 8 because this was not the movie, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you saw the film, what was your thought on it? I give it a 2 out of 5, bro. That's how bad I gotta say this film was, man. In my opinion, maybe a 3 out of 5 because the kills were pretty awesome. You know, when we got them. All right, guys. But that was my review for this movie. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later.